Why does the mind shut down the instant something difficult needs to be started, even when the importance is obvious? The deadline exists. The consequences are clear. Logic agrees the task matters, and yet the body stays frozen. Fingers drift to the phone, minutes disappear. Promises to start soon quietly replace action. This isn't laziness. It isn't a lack of discipline, and it isn't a sign that motivation is broken. Research points to a more uncomfortable truth. Procrastination is rarely about time. It's about emotion. When a task feels stressful, boring, overwhelming, confusing, or tied to the fear of failure, the brain searches for relief. Avoidance delivers that relief instantly. Scroll instead of start, and the discomfort drops. The brain learns a simple rule: delay works, and the brain loves rules that reduce pain fast. That's why procrastination feels so convincing in the moment. It isn't sabotage, it's self-soothing. A short-term emotional fix that trades future stress for present comfort. That is exactly where the 5-minute rule slips in. It doesn't fight the brain, it outsmarts it. Instead of forcing productivity, it lowers emotional resistance. Instead of demanding completion, it asks for a small, safe experiment. 5 minutes. No more. That tiny promise feels harmless, reversible, non-threatening, and once action begins, something unexpected often happens. Momentum starts building without pressure. Psychologists describe procrastination as short-term mood repair. Avoiding the task soothes discomfort now, even if it creates more anxiety later. Each delay reinforces the habit. Each escape strengthens the association between avoidance and relief. Over time, resistance appears faster and stronger. The first thing to understand is this: the brain doesn't avoid work, it avoids predicted discomfort. Before starting, the brain runs a simulation. It guesses how boring the task will be, how frustrating, how long it will take, how exposed failure might feel, how tired or stupid or inadequate it might make you feel. And humans are terrible at these predictions. Decades of research on effective forecasting show that people consistently overestimate how intense negative emotions will be and how long they will last. The task is imagined as heavier, uglier, and more painful than reality. But the brain treats that exaggeration as truth. That's why opening a blank document feels heavier than writing the third page. That's why tying shoes feels harder than finishing a run. That's why starting feels worse than continuing. The fear is front-loaded. This is where the 5-minute rule quietly bypasses the alarm system. The rule is simple: work on the task for 5 minutes. Not to finish it, not to do it well, just to begin. When 5 minutes are over, stopping is allowed. At first, this sounds useless. 5 minutes won't solve anything meaningful. That doubt is precisely why the rule works. 5 minutes doesn't sound dangerous. Finish the project sounds endless. 5 minutes sounds survivable. Commit triggers panic. Try briefly feels safe. That difference changes everything. In behavior change research, lowering the barrier to action is one of the most powerful tools available. One example is behavioral activation, a well-established psychological approach used to treat depression and avoidance. Instead of waiting to feel motivated, people act first in small, structured ways. Motivation follows action, not the other way around. The 5-minute rule doesn't wait for confidence. It creates it. Once the task begins, something subtle but powerful shifts. The brain stops predicting and starts experiencing. The imagined future filled with dread collapses into the present moment. And real tasks are almost always less painful than imagined ones. Even difficult tasks feel different once they're happening instead of looming. This shift alone weakens resistance. Research on learning and reward shows the brain reacts strongly when reality turns out easier than expected. That gap between expectation and experience rewires willingness. The brain quietly updates its model. A thought appears without effort. This isn't as bad as I thought, and resistance loosens its grip. But sometimes even 5 minutes feels impossible. This usually happens when the task feels personal. Writing something that might be judged, studying after falling behind, exercising after quitting, reaching out after avoiding someone. These tasks don't just feel hard. They feel like evidence about identity. They feel like proof. That's why the 5-minute rule has one non-negotiable condition. You must allow yourself to do it badly. 5 minutes of messy effort. 5 minutes of weak notes. 5 minutes of unfinished, imperfect work. No fixing, no polishing. No self-judgment, because procrastination often protects identity. If failure feels like confirmation of inadequacy, avoidance feels safer. Lowering the quality bar removes the threat. The brain no longer feels exposed. This is crucial, because the moment quality becomes mandatory, fear returns. Now ask this question honestly. If starting for 5 minutes works so often, why does procrastination keep winning? Because avoidance offers immediate comfort, working brings relief later, avoiding brings relief now. The brain evolved to chase fast relief. It prioritizes short-term emotional regulation over long-term outcomes. That's why procrastination feels so convincing even when it's clearly harmful. The 5-minute rule changes the timing of relief. Instead of waiting for the satisfaction of finishing, relief comes from movement itself. Starting creates a sense of control. Control reduces anxiety. Even small action interrupts helplessness. And another effect starts building quietly beneath the surface: repetition. Research on habit formation shows that habits are formed through repeated behavior, not dramatic effort. Large real-world studies show that automaticity grows slowly and varies widely. What matters isn't how fast it happens. It's that it happens at all. Each 5-minute start reinforces a simple identity. This is something that gets started. Not finished perfectly, not mastered instantly, just started. Over time, that identity weakens resistance before it fully forms. But there's a mistake that breaks the rule completely. If the brain senses a trap, resistance comes roaring back. If 5 minutes secretly means, and then you must keep going, pressure spikes instantly. The brain feels deceived. The emotional alarm goes off again. The rule only works if stopping is genuinely allowed. And here's the paradox most people miss. Stopping after 5 minutes is not failure. In many cases, stopping builds trust. It teaches the brain that starting doesn't lead to punishment, exhaustion, or shame. That trust makes the next start easier, and the one after that easier still. There's also a practical reason the rule works. Starting has a real cognitive cost. Research on task switching shows that shifting attention requires effort. You have to load the task into working memory, recall context, and focus. That startup cost is often the hardest part. 5 minutes lowers that cost. You're not switching forever, just briefly. Timers help for this reason. A clear endpoint reduces anxiety. Boundaries calm the brain. And once the task has started, something unexpected happens. Stopping feels harder than continuing. Psychologists have shown that unfinished goals stay mentally active. Once a task is opened, it creates an open loop in the mind. That open loop pulls attention back toward completion. The 5-minute rule opens the loop without demanding closure. Now consider the hardest scenario. What if the task really is boring, painful, or frightening? That's exactly when the rule matters most. Pain feels tolerable when it's short. Fear feels manageable when it's timed. Boredom feels survivable when there's a clear end. Procrastination research keeps arriving at the same conclusion again and again. Procrastination is primarily about emotion management, not time management. When emotions are handled first, behavior follows naturally. The 5-minute rule manages emotion before effort. It shrinks the task. It reduces imagined pain. It lowers cognitive load. It builds repetition. It creates psychological safety, not because 5 minutes is magical, but because 5 minutes is enough to prove the brain wrong. The 5-minute rule works because it turns effort into a test instead of a threat. By shrinking the start, it quiets fear, lowers emotional pressure, and lets experience replace imagination. Once the brain feels safe, momentum appears without force. If something important is being avoided right now, don't save this for later. Set a 5-minute timer and start the smallest, messiest version of the task. When the timer ends, stopping is allowed, or it might not feel necessary. Either way, the hardest part is already done. If this helped, like and subscribe for more tools that work with the brain instead of fighting it.